Speaking of those New Year's Six bowl games, here are the latest projections. Notables include Memphis making the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic as the highest Group of 5 conference champ. Virginia is in the Capital One Orange for the first time in program history. And these are the latest projections, by the way. In a matchup of offense versus defense, Baylor, Georgia, in the All-State Sugar Bowl. Speaking of the Sugar Bowl, that venue and destination everybody wants to get to for the national championship. LSU's traditionally anemic offense would have its fortunes changed by hiring an unknown college name and Joe Brady to be the Tigers' pass game coordinator, and the former Saints assistant would help turn quarterback Joe Burrow into a Heisman favorite as he set the SEC record for most passing yards in a season. LSU's offense clicking on all cylinders. The Tigers finally getting the tide off their back, beating Bama for the first time since 2011. Now they are SEC champs after dominating Georgia last night. Marty Smith is with the LSU Tigers this morning and joins us. And Marty, what's the schedule like for the SEC champs the rest of the day?
Morning, Kevin. There's not a whole lot going on around here this morning. The players are actually off, and Ed Orgeron and the coaching staff will be off recruiting all day long, of course, with the new recruiting schedule. That happens at a lot of schools now. As soon as the conference championships are over, these coaches are heading around all over the country trying to lure new talent to their respective universities. That's the case here. We do hope we can catch up with Coach O later today, though.
Okay, now, with this idea of people doing their own thing this morning, how much is this team thinking about the seedings and the rankings at noon?
Certainly they'll be paying attention, but they don't care. I flew back here to Baton Rouge last night with the LSU Tigers after that SEC championship game victory over Georgia, and the air was very simple. Anybody, anywhere, anytime. I know we hear some teams say that sometimes. It's obvious to me that this one means it. In fact, I interviewed Joe Burrow on the field after the game while he was still holding the MVP trophy from that game, and I asked him, why are the LSU Tigers the #1 team in the land? He said, man, we don't care about that. Send us to Canada. Let's tee it up in a gravel lot. We don't care who we're playing or when we're playing them. We're ready for anybody. And one reason they've had such a tremendous, transcendent, historic season here in Baton Rouge is certainly Joe Burrow's performance. I know you guys have discussed it ad nauseum this morning and throughout the season, but I asked his teammate, All-American safety Grant Delpit, why they were #1 last night in the locker room after the game, and he said 2 words: Joe Burrow. I followed up with, why is that your answer? He said, man, he's the greatest quarterback I've ever seen. He's a magician handing the Heisman right now. Most of us expect that to happen next Saturday night in New York City. And the awards season is upon us for LSU. They have several players up for national awards. So it's been quite a season. One last thing, Kirby Smart said after the game about this LSU team. He said, I've been in this league a really long time. I don't think I've ever seen the combination they have offensively. Obviously an elite quarterback, they have elite wide receivers, they have a great running back who's a matchup nightmare. He said, I have not ever seen this level of potency in this league. That's quite a statement for a guy that's been around the league a long time.
Yeah, especially the guy that has faced Alabama the last 2 years, Marty Smith. You hear the noise in the background. It's always a Marty party wherever he's going. There's a 10K in the background in Baton Rouge, of course, with that noise. And back here with our guys. And we've talked about it at length all season. You've had the chance to hang around Joe Brady and Joe Burrow. What was your biggest takeaway, Mark, experiencing the idea of LSU and their passing attack with this new coach and this kid who's understanding a new system?
Well, listen, he picked up the system fast. That's what Joe Brady said right away. But the other thing is he drew similarities between him and Drew Brees in his press conference last night, and it was so obvious when I was down there. Credit to Coach Orgeron for giving Joe Brady the freedom to inject this kind of a system where the quarterback, these guys are lining up in empty constantly. They're motioning. Guys, we're talking about an LSU passing attack that we've never talked about before. He's resetting the record books for them because of this system that he brought over from the Saints. And it starts with his footwork. It starts with his eyes and making great decisions. And he did that all year long.
Yeah, you mentioned Drew Brees, and I was fortunate enough to play with him for 7 years, practice against him, and I remember the offense being so nuanced and so particular, where it wasn't about the slot receiver just lining up a yard off the hash. It was really about, if your defender is playing you with inside leverage, and I need you to get another yard back inside to gain that space so that we can get the route to where we need to be and have the proper spacing. So if Joe Burrow has been able to pick it up, and you could see, I mean, the way he plays and anticipates, if he's playing at that level, and I understand why Joe Brady would be comparing him to Drew Brees, I mean, that is big time. You're talking about 10+ years in the NFL, big time.
How about the man that made the decision to bring Brady in to work with Burrow? So, yeah, Joe Burrow, he's the Heisman, he might as well just,
just give it to him.
Yeah.
Yes.
But Ed Orgeron, okay? Ed Orgeron has given that team a great deal of confidence and a comfortability. I mean, you watch him in his post-game press conferences. You watch him when he's preparing for a game. He's always loose, but he's always focused. This team plays with great confidence, which means they can play fast. And when you can play fast, you can play effective. And I think it all goes back to Coach O. He's shown great confidence in his team. They have absorbed that. They go out on the field. They're focused, but they play free. They play loose. They have fun. And he's changed. He's transformed himself as a football coach, not just with what he's doing offensively, but the way that he approaches his team. And so you see it in the way he handles Joe Brady and the way that Burrow is playing.
Now, they're the #1 team in the country in offensive efficiency, and Joe Burrow, 48 touchdown passes, SEC record. He's fantastic, but also, I mean, one of the big storylines in that win over Alabama, the running game. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, when you watch him play, how much has he developed as the primary guy? Because we're used to seeing great backs at LSU. The shock this year is they didn't have a great back at the start of this season. Where is he now in this offense?
He is the catalyst for this offense. And Jim, you always talk about players that play with a chip on their shoulder. He's been playing with a chip on his shoulder because when he was recruited, he was told he wasn't good enough to play in the SEC, right? He was snubbed. He wasn't the best running back or a SEC-type running back. And so you can tell when he runs, the tackles that he breaks, the way he cuts, his explosion. All of a sudden, Ed Orgeron, as mark of a great coach, said, first part of the season, we're using him, and, it's being pretty productive. All of a sudden, let's use him a little bit more. Let's get him in the passing game. Let's watch him break more tackles. And now when you have that element, it is damn near impossible to stop that offense. We always talk about you can't stop them. You just want to slow down
right?
that LSU offense. You can't stop them because of the running game.
That's exactly right.
That they make a mistake somewhere along the line. I've been a defensive coordinator in the NFL. I've, coached defense in college. And when a team gets their neck up on the run, and they can run the football on you, and yet they've got those 3 tremendous threats on the outside, you are so hamstrung because you can't double everybody and stop the run. Heck, you can't double one person and really be effective versus the run unless you've just got some monsters inside. And so the fact that their running game has emerged, and this young man has taken the bit, has just opened everything up. We used to go against Chris Carter and Randy Moss when they were with the Vikings. You go, okay, we got to double both of those guys, and then Jonathan Smith is ripping you apart.
Robert
Smith, excuse me, sorry, Robert. Robert Smith is ripping you apart, and you're like, what do we do? You're spending the whole game guessing with your defensive calls, and that's a bad feeling.
Yeah, and a couple weeks ago, I texted Joe Burrow. I said, what's up with this running back, man? He's kicking butt. He's taking names. What's his deal? He said, we call him Mighty Mouse for a reason.
Mighty Mouse for a reason. Hey, Mark, thank you. You're going to catch a plane.
That's right.
These guys aren't going anywhere. Plus, we're adding with JV Coach Mora and Mark Sanchez as we discuss, of course, the top 4 teams to get in. And, of course, the big discussion most of the season is who's going to get that 4th spot. That kind of sorted itself out. It looks like Oklahoma will be getting that 4th spot. But the question is the 1 seed here and potentially following up the 2 seed. And Coach Mora, you had a fascinating discussion with us last segment where you had LSU as your 1 seed for the last about month, and then last night Ohio State changed it. Give us your top 4.
Well, like I said, I'm Ohio State #1. Here, we're having
See, it won't even do it because it knows LSU goes there.
What's going on there? Help me out. You need the double tap.
There we go.
I made my point for Ohio State.
Yes, you did.
So I'm going to come off of that. And then LSU. Certainly, there's a lot of people that say, hey, Coach Mora's an idiot. They've said that for years and years and years, and he'd want to flip that. But I really feel strongly about those 2, and I do feel strongly about Ohio State #1. And then certainly Number 3 is Clemson, and as we've all said, that's a dynamic team. It's an explosive team on both sides of the ball. They don't have weaknesses, but it's going to come down to who they've played, I believe. And then, you know, Utah, unfortunately, on Friday night, really clarified this for those of us that want drama, and those of us, me, and I think Jonathan, that kind of wanted to see Utah in the college football playoff.
Praying.
Yesterday, Oklahoma did something that I haven't seen them do since early in the season, and that was play ferocious defense. Outstanding defense, swarming
Suffocating
defense,
defense.
suffocating, tackling defense. So I feel good about my 4, Jonathan.
I feel good that you have the right 4.
That's what we start. I couldn't even. I will go by what you told me. JV, you got LSU here at 1.
Yes, I did.
Right? The big question is, and that's going to be hotly debated, I think, for the next 2.5 hours.
Correct.
I think the surprise among everybody else in here is that you have Clemson 2.
Yes, slight edge over Ohio State, and the reason I have Clemson at number 2 is when we talk about teams and where they are as a unit and are they ascending, descending. Clemson, look at the history of Clemson. They always struggle early on in the season, and then they get better and better and better. And then case in point, last year when everybody was on Alabama, Clemson came in and beat Alabama, beat the brakes off them. You look back 2 years ago, it's always happened. That's the DNA of Dabo Swinney's team. So I'm watching Clemson, and they had the struggles early on. It was really one person that had the struggles, Trevor Lawrence. Everybody else was playing lights out. Now that he's playing well, I'm saying, how do you beat them? How do you stop them?
I don't even know how you attack them.
Exactly. How do you defend the Higgins and the Rosses of the world with Etienne in the running back position, right? And then Trevor Lawrence, of course, using his legs. So right now, that matchup is better. I understand the resume and all that, and I have Ohio State number 3. Again, very, very slight edge. But I saw Ohio State early on, and I was a big advocate of them being number 1 for all the weeks that the college football rankings were coming out. And then I started seeing them start to give up a little bit in the run game. They weren't as stout. They weren't as strong. They weren't as dominant. And yes, Chase Young was doing a phenomenal job in the passing game, but I looked and said, wait a minute, the running game is starting to have little holes, and I don't know if that's because of the scheme, or is that because of players, or because of competition. And when I see that you can't stop the run, or you start to give up bits in the running game, that is a big concern playing at these top talented teams. Then, of course, Oklahoma, as you mentioned, Jim, defense, I love it. I love to see that they finally said, we're going to put it on our backs. It's been how many years that the Oklahoma offense has put it on their back, defense is putting it on their back.
You're a big fan of Alex Grinch in the DC, right?
I mean, he was charged with that, and he might have one of the toughest jobs here coming up.
Definitely.
Trying to defend that LSU offense.
Whether it's Burrow or Fields.
Either way, if it's dual threat in Fields, we saw Joe Burrow scamper off a couple runs yesterday. Don't sleep on him stealing a couple third down conversions. That can be a backbreaker to a defense.
He pulled away from some of the defenders.
He sure did. And you saw him move around in the pocket. He's elusive. That's going to be a tough charge for Alex Grinch, but he's had a great year.
Back to Ohio State being here 3.
Yes.
You had them for the majority of the season, at least the last month, number 1.
Yes.
Was it the Penn State? Was it last night?
It was an accumulation. Okay, so it was accumulation of you watch the Penn State game, and you see the second half of the Penn State game, they're able to start to run the ball. They're able to start to kind of impose their will on the Ohio State defense. Okay, fine, it's one game, things happen. Then you go to the Michigan game. You're saying, well, yes, they played very well, put up 56 points, but they're still able to gain some yards on Michigan. Michigan on Ohio State. And you kind of just start to scratch your head. As I said, I'm watching them. I understand the resume. I understand these are top talented teams, etc. But then you go to, this is the straw that broke the camel's back. When you have Wisconsin, there is one player, and he's the best player, best running back in college football, and Jonathan Taylor. And that's the only person you have to stop. And he rips you for over 100 yards in the first half when you know that is the only person you have to stop, and you played them early in the season and you still couldn't stop them. That's a problem when you're facing these guys up here. And that's why I'm saying that Ohio State is going to, flip it back. But you know what I mean.
Yeah.
That's the issue I have.
Interesting, and I love to hear that you come back to the run game, because you know as a defensive player, when a team can run it against you, they take your heart, and you know as a
they do whatever they want
when
against
you can hand it off and you're running it, there's nothing that makes you happier. When As a coach, I know when I'm running it well, we got them. And when they're running on us, it's like, oh my goodness, what do I call?
That's right.
So great points, Jonathan.
Yeah, and if we do see this 2-3 here, whether it's switched around, Ohio State is the 2 seed, Clemson can run the ball really well.
That's right.
And of course, this discussion starts with the quarterbacks. Trevor Lawrence has been